All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee. I am Delegate Tony Bridges, the chair of the committee. I'm along here with Vice Chair Proctor and also Delegate McKay of the committee. We appreciate you all being here. I will apologize in advance for today's subcommittee hearing because we're going to have a short hearing today. What I mean is we are only going to be able to have this hearing for the next hour before we lose members and quorum for another subcommittee hearing. And so, again, I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm going to move this along pretty quickly. So for our agency representatives, what I'm going to ask you to do is to, after the analyst gives the analysis and after we ask any questions of the analyst, once we turn it over to you, if you can just respond to the questions from the analysis or the recommendations from our DLS analysts and any questions that we have as members we may ask, but ask that you also respond to those in writing for us. So you do not have to go too long in responding to the questions, but we are going to ask for those questions in writing. For the individuals who are here to give your public comment, unfortunately, we're only going to be able to have you speak for 1 minute. We're going to time the public comment, and after the 1 minute, I'm going to have to move on to the next person. So I just wanted to give you those highlights before we got started with the committee. And so with that, the first budget hearing we're going to do is the Office of the Public Defender. And to give the analysis, we have Mr. Caleb Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to start the presentation. Can everyone see the document up on the screen?
Yes, sir.
In the fiscal 2023 budget, it increases by 5.7 million or 4.9% to bring the total to 120.5 million. Here we have an overview of agency spending. As you can see, 78%, similar to past years, goes towards personnel. Over here, you have 15% going toward case-related expenses, which you can see here on the sidebar. That includes panel attorney fees, other legal expenses, and other costs associated with cases. In Exhibit 2, we have the proposed budget increases. I'd like to draw your attention here to the 2.2 million for step increases for attorneys to maintain competitive salaries. Also down here in the non-personnel section, I'd like to point out the $1.7 million increase for the restarting the workload reduction attorney program. Here in the personnel section, we have a decrease of 16.25 contractual positions. OPD's contractual positions fluctuate in response to workload demands. The fiscal 2023 budget shows this reduction in positions. However, the funding has actually increased by 0.5 million over the fiscal 2022 working appropriation. Here we can show that vacancies are particularly high among more experienced attorneys, and we're asking that OPD should comment on these vacancies and the impact that they're having on its operations and the ability of Marylanders to access legal representation. Here in Exhibit 3, we have the attorney vacancies by classification. As you can see here in the red pie slice of 26 vacancies are for Assistant Public Defender 3s, which are more experienced public defenders. You can also see here that the second largest bit is in the yellow, which is Assistant Public Defender 2s, which is another more experienced classification. Over here in the blue is the Assistant Public Defender 1s, which are the more entry-level positions. I'm going to skip over the managing for results section in the interest of time, but however, I would like to note that the fiscal 2020 managing for results data was lost in the ransomware attack. Also at this time, OPD transitioned from the calendar 2019 data to fiscal 2021 data, switching from reporting on a calendar year basis to a fiscal year. Moving forward, to OPD turnover rates. In 2021, calendar 2021, the turnover rate increased to 15%, up from 9% the prior year. You can see that here in Exhibit 7. And we're asking that OPD comment on this and address any steps that are being taken to decrease this turnover rate. Exhibit 8 shows the turnover departures of attorneys by classification. Similar to the vacancy data, you can see that the public defender 3s and public defender 2s, which are the purple and red lines respectively, are substantially higher than the blue line, which is the public defender 1s, as well as the supervisory roles, which are the green line here. Next, we have a comparison of public defender compensation in Maryland to public defender compensation in other related jurisdictions. Here you can see that the Maryland bar is the green, and however, the Virginia one without supplement is the yellow bar, but with the supplements for Arlington County and Fairfax County are the light blue bar and the navy blue bar respectively. As you can see here, that Maryland public defender pay is roughly comparative to Virginia public defender pay without the supplement. However, when you add the supplements for Arlington and Fairfax County respectively, the public defender pay in those counties is substantially higher at all levels of classifications within the department. Next is an additional comparison of compensation. This is between Maryland in the yellow bars and the DC Public Defender Service in the navy blue bar, and then the Office of Federal Defenders for the District of Maryland in the red. As you can see here, at all levels of attorney classifications and years of service, Maryland OPD does lag behind both the DC Public Defender Service and the Federal Public Defenders for the District of Maryland. We're asking that OPD should comment on the lower compensation that OPD attorneys receive compared to peer agencies and the impact that this is having on turnover rates. The second issue is the OLA fiscal compliance audit. I'm not going to read the audit findings here, but I would like to highlight the one regarding the Department of Information Technology recommendations. OPD did not fully implement 3 of these 10 recommendations made after the investigation of the IT security incident experienced by OPD in March of 2020, which is the ransomware attack that I referenced earlier. Here we have a short description of the ransomware attack and the impact that it had on OPD operations at that time. DLS also recommends the adoption of committee narrative requesting a report on IT security conditions within OPD and the steps that are being taken by OPD to implement the recommendations made by Department of Information Technology. Moving on to the recommended actions, we have 2 recommended actions. The second one down here is actually the report that I just referenced. The first is DLS recommends adopting committee narrative of requesting a report on attorney applicants, hiring, and separations. This would include the number of attorney applicants per position, the classification of newly hired attorneys, the number of separations by classification, and the reason for each separation. And with that, I have a couple updates. The first is the new OPD e-Defender case management system. That project has now been implemented. And we also have a short description of the workload reduction pilot program, which the funding was initially rescinded. However, the funding has been restored in the form of the workload reduction attorney program in the current fiscal year budget for fiscal 2023. And that ends my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Does anyone have any questions?
In the lieu of time, Mr. Chair, I'll just send my questions directly to him.
Thank you very much. Definitely appreciate it. Seeing no more questions, thank you, Mr. Weiss, for your thorough analysis. Definitely appreciate it. We will now turn to Mr. Paul DeWolf from the State Public Defender's Office of the Public Defender. Mr. DeWolf, you don't have to give us your written testimony. I know that we have everyone's written testimony. If you wanted to respond to the recommendations of the analyst, that would be grateful. You're on mute, though.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to introduce our Deputy Public Defender, Keith Lottridge, who is going to give the response of the agency. And I'd also like to introduce our Chief Financial Officer, Kathy Mattis. Ms. Mattis and I would be happy to answer any of the questions, and we'll do so in writing should time permit. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lottridge, who's going to give our response.
Thank you, Mr. DeWolf. I understand, Mr. Chair, you'd like me to be brief, so I won't read my entire presentation. I'll try to get to a few of the things, though. Most of the questions really resolve around our caseload, to be honest with you, and our salary structure. As you're aware, I think everybody in this committee is aware, we have an exceptionally high volume of cases than we have for many years. COVID has dramatically impacted that because, quite frankly, in the last 2 years, cases weren't resolved. Doesn't mean we haven't been working. Our attorneys, our core staff, our social workers have been continuously working because people are being held in jail, and the delay is having an impact on our clients' lives. But the backside of that is this: cases aren't resolved. Every day new cases come in. So the first part we're having is the fact that we have had historically high cases, and our attorneys, quite frankly, are working, our entire staff is working, but we're not resolving them. That's all gonna, by the way, change again on March 7th as the courts go to, or step out of phase 3. Phase 3 is where there's no jury trials, and they're gonna try to start upping trials again. So what we have is this 2 years of backlog of cases, not enough attorneys, and quite frankly, more cases are gonna be set starting March 7th than we've had even pre-COVID because of the backlog and the attempt to keep up with the new cases coming in. So that's the first part of the answer to the questions raised. The second part is quite simply this. Historically, our staff is underpaid. All of our staff is underpaid. The Office of the Public Defender has requested over the years salary increases for our staff. And in fiscal year 2022, we did get some relief for our staff, but it was only for attorneys. It was only for the attorneys with the greatest disparities. It did not give us increases for our support staff, our core staff, or anyone else, just for the attorneys with the greatest disparities. So we have attorneys who haven't had raises, core staff who haven't had raises, social workers who haven't had raises, and caseloads which are quite frankly crushing. So let me speak briefly about the caseloads to give you the information to kind of absorb this. Our caseload standards are based on something from 2005. That's our caseload study from 2005. I know my time is short, but I need to get into this. In 2005, a DUI, this is an example, a DUI in 2005 took on average less than 2 hours to prepare, because what you really had was 10 pieces of paper. You had to talk to your client, you had to review the discovery with your client, talk to the state attorney, and then talk to the charging officer. In 2022, that same simple DUI, which took 2 hours in 2005, we now have cruiser cam, which we have to collect, find, review. We have body worn camera, which we have to collect, find, review. And again, you have to review all of that with your client. Me just telling you this is taking 10 minutes. In 2022, that case, that simple DUI is going to take 6 or more hours. And those are the standards we're using to judge how many people we need. So in answer to many of the questions, we have crushing caseloads. I'm trying to really sum up here for you quickly.
Yep.
I got the 1 hour thing. We have crushing caseloads, which we need to adjust. I will tell the committee this. In this summer, the RAND Corporation, the ABA, the state courts, the Association of the State Courts, I think it is, and some other organizations and experts are putting together new national standards for public defenders. Based on what we think those national standards will be, our caseloads are, quite frankly, absurd. We need more people to handle this. So that, when we get to why we're losing people, money and absurd caseloads. Our analyst, Caleb, showed you what public defenders can make in other locations. They can go to another private sector or a public sector, make more money, and have a smaller caseload, workload. The quality of life improves dramatically. The people in our agency, I'm going to sum up here because
If you could
respecting your
sum
time,
that up.
the people in our agency have stayed here and have worked under very difficult conditions because they are dedicated to our clients. Quite frankly, we need more resources to support them. I think that answers your questions. Hopefully, if not, we can kind of go into more detail.
No, I think it does. I wanted the response to the analysis, and I think you definitely summed that up. I don't know if any of our members have any questions as well. Seeing none, I know if we do have further questions, we'll be following up and asking for those responses in writing.
We'll be available. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We also have a few people here to give public comment as well. And for the individuals that are giving public comment, I'm going to ask you to limit your comments to 1 minute, and we will be timing you as well. And so the first person is Eddie Fortuna.
Thank you. It's Edie Fortuna.
Edie, sorry about that.
It's a common mistake. So thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm an Ask Me Local 423 member, and I've been a public defender in Maryland for almost 19 years. I've spent probably the majority of that time sleep deprived, and I've completely bought into a culture where working yourself ragged was encouraged and expected under the conditions under which we've worked. In Southern Maryland, where I worked for 6 years, I learned that it's especially hard to attract good lawyers to practice in a rural county when you're understaffed. Lawyers who are burned out due to understaffing will quit. Right now, St. Mary's County has 13 state attorneys and 1 public defender due to attrition. She's a great lawyer. She's a wonderful attorney, compassionate, dedicated, but she's human and it is not okay. Panel attorneys are expensive and they don't stop the bleeding. There just aren't enough of us as attorneys, social workers, core staff, paralegals. This holds true for every place I've practiced since 2003. OPD needs more attorneys, which will make the job a lot more palatable, a lot more doable, will be more effective, will meaningfully fulfill the right to counsel, have work-life balance, and will
Thank you, Edie. Thank you very much for your comments. Definitely appreciate it. Sorry that I had to wrap you up there, but our time is limited today. We also have Angie Chu, who's here to speak. Cho, thank you.
Worries.
All right. Floor is yours.
Afternoon. Good afternoon, delegates. My name is Angie Cho, and I am a member of the Maryland Defenders Union, Ask Me Local 423. I spent the last 10 years working as a clinical social worker with the Office of the Public Defender. Nearly all the people OPD represents, the youth, the adults with severe mental illness, the people who have been incarcerated for 20, 30, 40 years, and for whom the recent Juvenile Restoration Act is offering hope for a life outside of prison, all of them would benefit deeply from our support and assistance. Social workers are uniquely positioned to identify what's at the root of our clients' legal problems: trauma, substance use, mental health concerns, and poverty, just to name a few. Every day, we address the complex issues that bring people before the courts to begin with. And in doing so, we help our clients avoid future contact with the legal system. Our work benefits the community and it saves Marylanders money. With the current budget surplus, the state can and should be making a bigger investment in us. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And you kept it at 1 minute. Definitely appreciate you. Cheryl Red, floor is yours. Cheryl.
Good afternoon, delegates. Thank you for your time. My name is Cheryl Hughes Red, and I have been a paralegal with the Office of the Public Defender for 17 and a half years. For the last 13 years, I have worked in the forensics division. Myself and one other person review all forensic requests, and we do a multitude of other functions within our office. For the last year and a half, I have obtained 3 certifications in cell phone extraction and training in cell phone mapping and analysis. I now review cases with cell phone discovery to assist our attorneys while I'm still just holding a paralegal classification. Recruitment and retention of core staff is vital to our agency. We have secretaries that are working for 8 to 10 attorneys, which causes burnout in the staff. Because of the wages for core staff, they are forced to work 1 to 2 part-time jobs in addition to their job at OPD. Last year, attorney salaries were reviewed by OPD, but not our core staff. We need more funding for recruitment and retention of core staff as we are vital to the agency. I just ask that you give more resources to our agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. You also kept us to a minute. Definitely appreciate you. Thank you all for being here today as well. Definitely appreciate you and your public testimony today. That will end the budget hearing for the Office of the Public Defender. Thank you all for being here. We'll now move on to the Uninsured Employers Fund. And Mr. Kramer, if you can give us the analysis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here. My name is Jason Kramer, and I'm here to present the analysis for the Uninsured Employers Fund. The UEF pays workers' compensation claims for employees whose employers are uninsured and is funded by an assessment on workers' compensation awards. This exhibit shows the budget for the agency over the last 3 years. The increase between fiscal 21 and 22 is due to the agency not properly budgeting for a third-party administrator contract. Exhibit 1 shows the breakdown of the fiscal 2023 allowance. Nearly 2/3 of the allowance is for a contract with Corvell, a third-party administrator, with most of the rest of the allowance for agency personnel. The agency has 13 authorized positions in the allowance. 4 of those positions are vacant, and 2 of those positions have been vacant for longer than 6 years. I'm going to, due to time, I'm going to skip ahead to the fund balance discussion. As you can see in Exhibit 3, the fiscal 2021 fund balance closed at $8.5 million. That's up slightly from $6.3 million the prior year. An actuarial study by Pinnacle at the close of fiscal 2020 found liabilities of $116 million at the close of fiscal 2020. While there has been a variance between that study by Pinnacle and the actual results since then, the fund still appears to be on track for insolvency by the end of the decade. When asked for a plan to avoid insolvency, UEF only stated that an increased assessment is necessary. I will, again, one comment we have for the agency that we would like them to respond to. UEF continues to report TPA expenses as benefits payments in certain reporting. And so DLS has recommended that UEF correctly report its TPA contract expenses as operating expenses in the future. Exhibit, I'm going to skip ahead to positions. Last session, the Budget Committee has requested a report on personnel needs for the agency. A list of positions at the agency is shown here, but the report did not include an evaluation of personnel needs for the agency. The UEF states that the third-party administrator contract is necessary, but without a personnel evaluation, it's difficult to make that determination. Finally, the Office of Legislative Audits published an audit report on UEF in September of last year. There were 3 findings. 2 of those were repeat findings. The OLA found overpayments were made to Corvell as UEF did not ensure proper documentation of hours worked by the contractor's employees. They also made payments for services that were already included in the contract's monthly fee. OLA also found that UEF did not review approximately $1.9 million in recurring payments, although no improper payments were found. And finally, the audit noted that one Corvell employee was the family member of a former UEF employee involved in the procurement, and a UEF employee had costs covered by Corvell for an out-of-state conference. That those matters were referred to the Ethics Commission, which has not taken any action as of yet. DLS recommends that UEF resolve its audit findings surrounding the TPA contract before pursuing an increase in the annual assessment. And we also recommend adding language to the budget restricting funds until the OLA provides a report certifying that the UEF has taken corrective action on the audit findings. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your thorough analysis. Definitely appreciate it. We will move right along to Mr. Michael Burns. Mr. Burns, thank you for joining us today. If you could give a brief introduction of your staff and get right into the recommendations from the analysts, that would definitely be appreciated. Thanks for being here.
You as well, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. With me today is Mr. Michael Schaefer. He is the claims manager for the Corvell staff here at the UEF, and Mr. David Stetch, the principal counsel at the UEF. They are here for information purposes. If you have any questions, they may well be better suited than I to answer them. I'd like to first thank Mr. Jason Kramer for his excellent analysis, for his cooperation, and his positive attitude during the process of preparing that analysis with the agency. It was a pleasure to work with him, and I hope that Mr. Kramer will continue to be our legislative analyst. He has certainly been beneficial to this agency. This agency agrees with his analysis and the suggested budget language. It will require us perhaps to fund a temporary position to go through the alleged delinquent accounts, but I can state as to the audit that the agency has been in the process of working to resolve all 3 audit findings since they were sent to the agency in September. It is our position we have complied with one of the audit findings. As to the other 2, it is our plan to resolve them, and we are more than happy to report that both to the legislature and to the Office of Legislative Audits, as Mr. Kramer suggested in his budget language. I would note for the committee that the prior audit of 2017 had 8 audit findings, 6 of which were resolved during the past 4 years as well. As to our expenditures, as Mr. Kramer noted, approximately 62% of the expenditures of the agency go to the contract with the Corvell Corporation for third-party claims services. Since your time is limited, I will not go into the numerous reasons that contract is a bargain and a necessity to this agency, but I will simply point out Exhibit 1, which notes that since 2017, the agency's medical payments on a fiscal year basis have been reduced by $3.4 million, and that is due in large part to having a competent TPA, Corvell, handle it. Mr. Chairman, I'm certainly able to answer any questions, but I understand you're busy and your time is limited, and I will certainly conclude again by saying we're more than happy to comply with anything the committee and the legislature requests.
Thank you very much. I know that there may be questions. If not given now, then we'll definitely ask to follow up by with a written response if possible.
Sure.
So do any of the members have any questions?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Seeing that there are no questions, I think that will end the hearing for Uninsured Employers Fund. Thank you very much,
ladies and
Mr.
gentlemen.
Burns.
Thank you
very much for being here.
Certainly, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And with that, we will move right into the Department of Public Safety and Corrections, Mr. Jacob Cash.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everybody. Let me share my screen. All right. For the Division of Corrections, which also includes the Maryland Correctional Enterprises, the budget allowance is $868 million. This is the largest unit within the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, and the budget increases by $36 million this year. I've already gone over most of the population discussion and other analyses, so I won't spend too much time here, but just know that COVID-19 had a large impact on the correctional population, starting in March of 2020 and lasting until mid-2021. There was a steep decline in inmates that didn't start to rebound until the summer when the judiciary went to phase 3. A similar situation has also unfolded for the Patuxent Institution, which is the institution for the criminally insane. In Exhibit 4, you can see that the age of offenders in custody have declined, the number of offenders under the age of 30 have declined by 1,000 each year, 2019 to 2021. That decrease of 2,000 offenders previously would have taken 5 years to accomplish with the existing trends. The current proportion of people that are under the age of 30 is only 28% compared to 37% in 2014. So it's very good to see the continuous decline in young people committed to incarceration. Exhibit 6 shows the average length of stay for these offenders, for all offenders in correctional custody. That has increased because of COVID-19 and court delays. And I'll point out that the groups with sentences below 5 years have declined substantially as they've been timing out of the system and not being replaced at the speed they used to be, while as these people with longer sentences have stayed in the department's custody during COVID. Exhibit 8 shows that assaults declined in 2021. Offender-on-offender assaults specifically declined below the goal, which is what we want to see, and it had not done that for 5 years. The overall budget is broken down in Exhibit 9. Majority goes to personnel and inmate medical expenses, whereas only about a quarter of Division of Correctional expenses are for other operational purposes. The main changes in the budget, as I mentioned, those $36 million increasing. 94% of that increase is because of personnel costs, and most of that is because the turnover adjustment, the budgeted turnover was reduced from 15.4% to 10%. That allows them to add more positions in fiscal 2023, using the departmental average about $4 million to add those positions. There's also a decrease in the position complement because the Baltimore pretrial facility in Jessup was closed, and those positions and dollars were moved back up, realigned within the Division of Pretrial Detention and Services. When we hear that analysis, I'll go a little bit more in depth about that change. Exhibit 11 shows the number of vacancies and the vacancy rate for different classifications in this agency. I'll point out that psychologists, counselors, and social workers have 42% vacancies, and there's also high vacancies in other support positions that are highly critical to the operations within facilities, such as dietary staff who make sure that meals occur on time and efficiently, as well as case management staff and other office and fiscal staff who make things run smoothly. Exhibit 12 focuses just on the correctional officers who are responsible for inmate custody. And as you can see, the gap between those who were hired and those who were separated has started to close from fiscal 2019 to 2021. There was a net increase in the employment both of those years. Not as much in 2021, but they're still in the good for that year. When we look at the month-to-month change in these employees, it appears that there's definitely room for improvement regarding recent trends in fiscal 2021. If they stay with these trends, they may lose correctional officers on that this year. The main concern, or one of the main concerns with high vacancy rates, is that overtime costs can grow enormously. As you saw in 2020, about $150 million went towards overtime, whereas that number was only $50 million in 2013. There has been a leveling off and a slight decrease in the overtime hours worked and cost of overtime, but this is something that we want to maintain oversight on and continue to decline the amount of overtime being worked. It has a great impact, a great negative impact on the people who are required to do that overtime, and it's something that we want to see reduced. We're asking DPSCS to comment on overtime and CO burnout and their plans for reducing it. We also are recommending that funds restricted in the previous session be released because the hiring and attrition reports were submitted, the second one submitted on January 25th. We also recommend to continue that language next fiscal year and restrict $100,000 for that purpose. Issue 2 is going into detail on reentry and pre-release services. This is an important function of the department to make sure people returning to society are doing so with the skills they need to succeed. DPS reported that 96% of releases in the previous fiscal year received a verified home plan, and 94% received reentry services. They can vary dramatically based on the individual need of the person. However, a list of examples are included on this page. I also want to differentiate between pre-release and reentry. Anybody who has a release date is eligible for reentry services, while those who are pre-release are only those in the lowest security classification. It doesn't mean that they're about to be released. It just means that they require the least amount of security. Minimum security and medium security inmates are also eligible for for instance, work release, several of the opportunities that we might associate with pre-release inmates are actually available for multiple security classifications. The standalone pre-release facilities have been closed by the department, including 2 of them in the past year. It used to be a larger pre-release system, but now it is just operating out of correctional facilities. There was a piece of legislation passed, which was vetoed by the governor, but the veto was overridden last year, which requires the department to create a women's pre-release center. It would likely be in Baltimore City based on where most inmates are returning. There's currently 62 women who are pre-release, and this project receives $150,000 in fiscal 2023 to plan the next stage of the project, which involves site planning and schematics, or sorry, not schematics, but project planning. So that. There's also a few more bullet points listing common opportunities that are available for inmates, including the local reentry program that I'll point out allows inmates in these 9 counties to return to that facility, to their local county for their final year of stay. The final issue I'm going to be talking about today is MCE sales. Sales are low, but they are still higher than expenses. Exhibit 17 shows the inmate employment against sales and spending. In 2021, you can see that there is a net profit. However, that may not continue to be the case depending on how trends go in the current year. Inmate employment is still low. Demand for most of the MCE's business units is still lower than it was prior to the pandemic, and their delivery time, as you can see in Exhibit 18, is much higher than it was in the past, and it impacts their ability to satisfy their clients. The one recommended action that we have for this analysis, as I previously mentioned, is to continue requiring quarterly hiring and attrition reports and restricting $100,000 for that purpose. There are some appendices that summarize the reports they were required to submit last year, as well as more detail on the budget. But with that, my presentation is concluded, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, I think, have we lost the chairman? Chair Bridges, can you hear us?
Oh, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
All right, sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Cash. Are there any questions for Mr. Cash? Seeing none, thank you very much for your analysis. We'll now move on to Secretary Greene. Secretary Greene, always good to see you. I know we can ask a lot of questions at times, but today we're not going to ask a lot of questions of you. We'll just ask that if we do have questions, you respond to those in writing for us. And so with that, if you can just respond to the recommendations from the analysts.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair Bridges, Vice Chair Proctor, members of the Public Safety Administration Subcommittee. For the record, my name is Robert Greene. I'm the Secretary of the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. You have our written testimony. I will be extremely brief. I want to acknowledge our excellent staff, the people that do the work every day and make us successful. They've done incredible work over the last 23 months. The first issue that we were asked to comment on is what keeps overtime costs low and prevent CO burnout. As this body knows, we've written, executed, and implemented a full pandemic plan over the last 23 months, and that has had extraordinary impact on our system. We provided this body a very thorough hiring and attrition report that if you do not have available to you, we'll make sure that you get it, which answer, I think, a lot of the questions around how we monitor our overtime. We look at it daily. We look at it by shift. We have seen a decrease in overtime by $5 million, and we will continue to seek to decrease overtime at every juncture. We know what we need to do that. We need to continue to hire line correctional officers. We understand the major strain upon our system is mandatory overtime versus overtime that is voluntary. We understand it's part of the public safety mission, but it's a strain. Since January of 2020, we've hired 954 correctional officers, and that outpaced attrition as indicated by Mr. Cash. Next, the department was asked to comment on MCE's current efforts to reduce MCE order delivery times, increase sales, and increase employment. As we know, COVID-19 has had an impact on every business practice. I would note that over 85% of MCE's deliveries have been on time, and it is improving. Even though they've experienced a decrease in sales, they continue to exceed their business plan goal of $50 million. With regard to program participation, MCE has went from all-time lows in the system to 942 active program participants as of December 2021. I believe we have answered those questions. And again, we concur with the recommended action. They're certainly available to answer any more questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Delegate Proctor, it looks like you may have a question.
I have two questions, and I guess we can answer them now or send me a written response. One, I saw an article in the Post that somehow the overtime of the employees was not calculated properly, and so now we owe more than $500,000 back to employees because they didn't get the pay that they should have. I'd like to basically know how that happened and do these employees now have their money back? And we also ask, and maybe you've sent this in, but I haven't seen it yet, the report regarding your medical services provider, Corazon. If that's not in, I'd like to see it. We have questions about whether they have received overpay, and I'd like for you to respond to that, please.
Very good. Thank you for that question, Vice Chair. Briefly, the Department of Labor made us aware of an inquiry in 2020. We've addressed that. We went through. We want our staff to be paid. We'll send you a full report of where we're at with that. But we participated in that inquiry and participated in the reimbursement of our staff for that. Since then, we've received some additional inquiries and will continue to do so because we're committed to making sure our staff are paid what they deserve. We will give you a full written report on what we have done there. Around the Horizon audit, that is correct, and that is in process where we there was some overcharging, and there's been a report issued on that by our Inspector General. There's been a response, and once our Inspector General does the final analysis, we'll assure that the state is reimbursed for those funds, and we will give you a full report on that.
And actually, Mr. Secretary, Vice Chair Proctor, we did submit a joint chairman's report specific to that issue. We'd be happy to circulate a copy again directly.
Okay, thank you very much.
If you would, please include the whole committee as well. I've got some serious concerns with that as well. And I know that we're going to be going to a rebid situation relatively shortly, and we need those answers. So thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you also, Rachel. I know we all have a couple of questions about that as well. And I think, Jacob, I don't know if I saw you. Did you have something that you wanted to add?
That will come up in the administration analysis, which is being heard, I believe, on the 7th of March.
Okay, so we'll revisit it also on the 7th of March.
Ooh, a second bite at the apple there, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir.
There you go. Delegate Acevedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I just wanted to follow up with the Secretary and Ms. Sessa. My office had reached out regarding information about the regs and the Police Accountability Board, et cetera, and wanted to make sure that we received that information and we could have that follow-up, please.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Delegate. We'll make sure that you get a response to your inquiry in writing.
Thank you very much.
All right, and we will also see you again on the 7th. So we'll have Delegate McKay said, another bite at the apple. I know we also have public comment, and so I'm going to turn to them unless you have anything else, Mr. Secretary.
No, I do not. Thank you to the subcommittee, and we appreciate your work.
Thank you. Definitely appreciate it. For the members of the public, once I call on you, you will have 1 minute to give your testimony, and I'm going to start with Matan Zemer. from Jews United for Justice.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the subcommittee. I will keep this brief. My name is Matan Zemmer. I am representing Jews United for Justice, which is a member of the Women's Pre-Release Coalition, which has been working for the establishment of a Women's Pre-Release Center for several years now. While you have my written testimony from a member of our organization, I just want to highlight a couple key factors. This legislative session, the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services has stated that they're including $150,000 in their operational budget for FY23 to get the planning phase of this started. We're grateful to hear that there's some level of movement happening. As you heard, the bill that would establish this passed a couple years ago now, but there's been no meaningful progress on this. So this is a step in the right direction. What we're asking is to have this highlighted as a line item or called out in some other specific ways so that we can have accountability to that being spent appropriately to move this forward. We have been in communication with Mr. Cash since the Senate subcommittee hearing, which has been great. We're super appreciative of that. And we're going to explore ways to do that, but we just ask that the subcommittee explore making that a line item or somehow structuring that in that way. The other piece that I just wanted to highlight is that the report was due from the department that was overdue. We've just learned that that was submitted on February 15th, so that's great to hear. We hope everyone.
I can have you wrap up your comments.
Yes, absolutely. I just want to highlight that Monica Cooper, who's the executive director of Maryland Justice Project, can't be here today, but just on her behalf, she is also echoing these calls for action because there's been essentially an economic veto of the bill by there not being action or money allocated for this project. So we appreciate any help from the subcommittee in ensuring that this moves forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. Definitely appreciate you. Next, we'll hear from Psalms Rojas, Marion House.
Great. Good afternoon, delegates. I'm going to make it brief and easy for you. I am echoing Matan's comments in our advocacy for seeing this 150 as a separate line item budget so that it is not lost in the budget. It does not get touched by other projects, and it stays designated specifically for this project. It's quite a different number than the 1.5 million that was allocated to them when the bill passed. And so we have questions about that as well. But today we want to focus on making sure that this $150,000 is something that can be tracked and something that stays specifically designated for the project. As advocates for this cause, we want to make sure that it is something that the department is being held accountable for. So we're simply asking for accountability and transparency in this process. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Rojas. Definitely appreciate you being here. I didn't see Nicole Hanson Mundell. Is she in here today?
She is in the room.
Nicole.
She was in the room. Nicole, are you there? I do see that she is in the room.
We'll move on if she's not able to speak right now. Denise Gilmore.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Denise Gilmore. I'm a field director with AFSCME Maryland. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. We do have 2 members testifying, so I'll be extremely short. In our written testimony, we highlight the staffing shortages that still persist, the issues around, the solutions that have been proposed that we think are inadequate. We've got an issue with case managers that you'll hear more about, and of course, our continued support for building the women's pre-release. But very quickly, we could use your assistance. We've been asking the secretary for some guidance on if masking is going to continue now that the statewide order has left. We've yet to get any kind of indication on if masking in the prisons will still continue. Jails are doing different things. We'd appreciate your help with at least getting some clarity on what we're doing to still maintain COVID safety moving forward. Of course, given that the response pay that was given was also stopped. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Denise. Next, is Nicole available now? If not,
I believe she is.
Okay, we'll move on to Shane Wolford.
Yes, thank you. My name is Shane Wolford, Correctional Maintenance Officer 2 at North Branch Correctional Institute. You have my testimony, but I just wanted to go over some things of correctional maintenance officers, along with other specialty trades, are constantly left out of, excluded from the rights and pay opportunities that are given to correctional officers. We go to the same training academy. We go to the same end service. We have the same cards that say we are certified correctional officers. We work in the institution. We take inmates out the institution. which probably only maybe 8% of correctional officers take an inmate out of the institution. We take them out every day. We do work outside the institution, Class A, B, and C tools. We keep the vehicles so the transportation officers can run inmates up and down the road for court hearings, medical, whatever it may be. We take care of not only everything in the facility, from panels to doors to plumbing to snow removal. We also we help with cell searches and shakedowns, and we've restrained inmates. We've taken inmates and had to get them under control to assist the officers. But yeah, for some reason, we're constantly left out that we are not correctional officers.
Thank you, Mr. Wolford. If I can have you wrap up.
Okay, that's really it. I just wanted to be addressed that, we are correctional officers and we're left out of the retention and longevity bonus and the steps too that were given to the COs. They're stepped out to 8. I got 15 years in, I'm a step 5.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
AC McCabe.
Good afternoon. My name is Arpadiana McCabe, and I have been a state employee working as a correctional case manager and a correctional officer for a total of 11 years. I appear before you today requesting that the lunch period for case managers be included in our workday and not as an addition to it. Correctional case managers rarely, if ever, get a 30-minute uninterrupted lunch period, yet we are the only ones in the correctional classification who are excluded from the paid lunch break. We do not want to cease helping inmates and their loved ones for 30 minutes in the middle of the day, nor do we wish to charge overtime to the department when we're unavoidably interrupted on most days during our unpaid lunch. Our extra 30 minutes of work is not included in the budget, but requesting overtime every time our lunch is interrupted would definitely negatively affect the budget. Approving our request for a shortened workday for less than 300 employees would incur absolutely no financial burden to the taxpayers and would provide a better service for our stakeholders. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I'm sorry, I have COVID, so I'm a little bit struggling with this, but I really appreciate my time. Thank
you. We appreciate your time as well and hope you feel better.
Thanks.
Nicole Mundell, are you? I see you on here now. Nicole?
Okay,
No?
Mr. Chairman, whoever is there from Out for Justice, we do see you. Would you like to speak?
I'm not sure she can even hear us. It doesn't look like it's working.
I'm asking her to unmute. Hello, Out for Justice. Yeah, I think she's having some technical problems.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're going to have to keep moving. We can always reach out and see if we can. Oh, wait, I thought she.
Okay, can we hear you?
You're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Are you speaking to me, Mr. Chair?
Yes. Yes.
Hey,
you have 1 minute.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We were having some technical difficulties. Nicole Hanson, Executive Director of Out for Justice. This is a new issue for this. You all know we need the monies named in the budget, $150,000. This is pennies compared to what this issue deserves. And we just ask that you stay committed to what you passed last year, the veto that you overrode, that ensured that the Department of Corrections must establish a stand-alone women's pre-release facility. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your patience and allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Definitely appreciate you being here. And we appreciate you all being here and giving your public testimony. And we will be also following up with the agency as well. So thank you all for being here. With that, we will end the hearing for the Department of Corrections and move to the Department of Juvenile Services. Madeline Miller, Ms. Miller, if you can give us your presentation.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name is Madeline Miller, and I'll be presenting the DJS or the DLS budget analysis for DJS. The fiscal 2023 budget increases $24.8 million or 9.4% to $288.6 million. Most of the change is the result of the transfer of the Juvenile Services Education Program, or JSEP, from the Maryland State Department of Education. The transfer adds 173 positions and a proposed budget of $22.4 million for DJS to provide educational programming and services to all juveniles placed in DJS operated detention and residential facilities. I'm going to move through quickly in the interest of time when I'm able to. So moving to Exhibit 1, within Maryland, total juvenile arrests have generally fallen over the past decade. The change was rather dramatic between calendar year 2016 through 2020. Total juvenile arrests over the 5 years shown are down 50.7%. Next, moving on to Exhibit 2. This shows both the total number of complaints received by DJS over the past decade and their dispositions. Over the past decade, the total number of cases requiring formal intervention fell 81.7%, while complaints have fallen over the last decade. Fiscal 2022 year-to-date data suggests that there could be an increase, likely driven by the reopening of schools. DLS projects an increase of about 26.2%, which would still have complaints be below their 2020 levels. Youth receiving informal supervision who are on probation and youth and aftercare programming make up the DJS non-residential caseloads. Consistent with the number of complaints, the non-residential population has also declined over the past decade. Exhibit 3 shows that caseloads have dropped 80.4% since fiscal 2021. Probation cases are projected to be historically low in fiscal 2022, consistent with efforts taken to keep youth from being court involved. Moving now to Exhibit 4, youth that require court intervention become part of the DJS detained population. Exhibit 4 shows trends for youth that are in the secure detention, predisposition, the pending placement population, and the adult court authorized population. Exhibit 4 shows that the total secure detention population was beginning to stabilize prior to the pandemic. The adult court authorized youths have made up a larger portion of the population and now account for about 52.9% of the detained population, the second year in a row in which the adult court population has made up over half of the detained population. Moving through the rest of the MFRs rather quickly, I'll just show that they are here if you are interested, if you need further questions relating to any of these exhibits. Within fiscal 2021, the DJS received $4.9 million in ARPA funds for level 1 and level 2 response pay and quarantine pay. Then in fiscal 2022, DJS does not receive federal stimulus funds, but does receive a general fund deficiency appropriation of $1.25 million. This will fund supplemental grants for IRC providers. Those are interagency rate committee providers. About 861 will be used for per diem expenditures, and 389,000 will be used for educational per diems. This pie chart lower below, Exhibit 9, provides an overview of the agency's spending. I'll note that $209 million is for regular contractual personnel. Youth programming accounts for about 12%, and the remaining 16% of funds are allocated toward operating expenses, miscellaneous contractual grants, and supplies and equipment. The where it goes chart, which begins on page 16. As I mentioned in the start of the presentation, much of the increase is attributable to the department's assumption of the JSEP, which is down here on the next page. The WIG is then continued. In addition to expenses associated with the JSEP, the budget adjusts for the current needs of the DJS youth. Another changes includes a $2 million general grant for Roca, Baltimore, as required by Chapter 596 of 2021. Now moving to the issues portion. There are a few, which I want to make sure I get the right cues for. I'm sorry about that. First being that JSEP moves to DJS. This is required by Chapter 147 of 2021. Preparations for the program are underway. DJS and MSDE have published the joint report on the transition of juvenile services education program, and the JSEP board has also published the Juvenile Services Education Board 2021 report to the General Assembly. With this addition of the new program, the Department of Legislative Services recommends the addition of committee narrative to require DJS to develop JSEP objectives and educational outcome measures for the managing for results section of the fiscal 2024 budget books and for subsequent fiscal years. Another thing to point out with the JSCP board is that we ask the department to comment on the progress that's been made towards implementing the law and identifying sources of funding for potential facility renovations to support JSCP following a initial facility assessment that was published in the fall. The second of the issues relates to OLA findings. Appendix 2 lists the audit 6 findings, 2 which are repeat from the previous audit. The fourth finding is that the department's use of certain intergovernmental agreements circumvented state procurement regulations, and that DJS did not ensure services provided and related charges were proper. The department has responded to this issue, and accordingly, there's a line in the where it goes chart, which shows that intergovernmental agreements will decrease in fiscal 2023. We ask that the DJS brief the budget committees on actions taken to address each of the audit findings. Finally, the Baltimore City Strategic Partnership. There was a JCR report that was requested about this topic that was requested last year. Since this was written, since February 16th, the JCR report has been submitted, but DLS asked that the committee the committee inform DJS inform the budget committees of what's going on, and we again recommend that committees adopt language restricting funds pending the submission of a 1-year update detailing the operations of the strategic partnership. Recommended actions can be found beginning on page 26, and with that, I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miller, for your very thorough analysis, as always. Much appreciated. I don't know if any of the members have any questions. If not, I will turn it over quickly to the Secretary for the Department of Juvenile Services. Secretary Abbott, it's always great to see you. Again, I know we have a limited amount of time today. If you could jump right to the response to the recommendations from the analysis, and we'll try to get to any questions we have before we get to the public testimony.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chairman Proctor, members of the subcommittee, Sam Abbott, Secretary for the Department of Juvenile Services. I would like to thank Ms. Miller for her excellent analysis, and that we agree with all of the recommendations that were made in the analysis. I think it was really good. We agree to all of them. And we have submitted written responses to those recommendations. I do want to thank our staff. We have a wonderful staff that has done an outstanding job really over the years, and especially over the last 2 years with the challenges that we faced with COVID. Just to mention some of the data that was already highlighted, you saw from the analysis that we've seen reduced intakes, significantly reduced intakes. Detention has been reduced. Commitments are down significantly. And basically, without going over into all the details, I just want to highlight how our reforms and our priorities have changed in the budget. And I think the thing that stands out to me most is that 10 years ago, we spent $56 million in 1 year on residential services. That's residential services for incarceration. Last year, we spent $9 million. So we went from 56 to 9 million in that period of time. So the other thing that really stands out to me is that if you look at what we were spending in the residential services compared to what we spent in the community, we spent twice as much money on incarceration as we did on community services. Now we spend 3 times as much in community services as we do on those residential services. And I think that reflects our priorities. Not only are our numbers down in terms of the number of kids being charged with offenses and throughout the system, but we're also getting better results and reduced recidivism. So I will stop right there and take any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I am going to send you a few written questions that I have just around collaboration on how you work with families as well as other behavioral health organizations on preventive measures for juveniles into the system. So I do have a few questions on that. Nothing that you can answer right now, with a limited amount of time, but I'll send those questions to see if you can respond to those in writing for us, please.
Absolutely.
Do any of the, yep, thank you. Do any of the other members have any questions before we go to public comment? If not, thank you very much. Again, Mr. Secretary, we'll now proceed to the public comments, and we will begin with Frederica Granger.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from the Montgomery County, the city of Rockville, and I'm on the Maryland Association of Youth Service Bureaus. I'm speaking on behalf of the Maryland Association of Youth Service Bureaus. We have provided early intervention and prevention services for youth demonstrating known risk factors for juvenile delinquency. We're one of the community-based organizations that have allowed for prevention of children going into the system. We are in a statute as part of a relative arm of the Department of Juvenile Services, and in 2006, the Maryland Senate unanimously passed legislation to emphasize the role of secondary prevention within DJS. The legislative intent of this was to statewide focus on prevention. This focus recognizes that as youth move deeper into the system, they cost more money, and the result of that, those later interventions are less positive than the outcomes of programs such as the Youth Service Bureaus. For example, data consistently shows that over 90% of youth receiving formal counseling at a youth service bureau are not adjudicated 2 years after formal counseling has ended. Of those youth referred by DJS itself, over 80% are not adjudicated 2 years after our formal counseling had ended. Diversion from the juvenile justice system has been the primary role of youth service bureaus since their inception. It's time to recognize the documented success of our community-based prevention programs, to strengthen them and to broaden their implementation. We have always supported the need of prevention services until a few years ago, always made sure the budget included designated funds for youth service bureaus. Unfortunately, under the current governor, the funds for youth service bureaus have been diminished over the last few years. Now, at the time when more and more mental health needs of youth are shown, we urge this legislative body, the Department of Juvenile Justice Services, to continue to promote the need for prevention services and to assist us in expanding the funds for youth service bureaus so that there can be at least one in every jurisdiction. We hope that you can support the increased mental health needs of youth today, ages 5 until 18.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Definitely appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Margo Quinlan.
Great. Thank you, Delegate Bridges, members of the subcommittee. My name is Margo Quinlan with the Mental Health Association of Maryland. We're here today to lift up and encourage the subcommittee to adopt language to direct the department to report on youth co-design of systems as a way of reducing juvenile justice involvement. Youth co-design means that young people are not only the recipients of services, but that they're partners in all elements of that service, including the implementation, evaluation, and evolution of programming. And the department itself conducted listening sessions back in 2020, which identified a lack of mental health and substance use resources as a contributing factor in the disparate criminalization of Black and Brown youth. Accordingly, we would urge this committee to adopt budget language which directs DJS in partnership with the Behavioral Health Administration to jointly review some of the current youth prevention and early intervention programs which support mental health and substance use needs of youth, including those at risk of incarceration or recidivism. And thank you. I'm happy to talk more with subcommittee members and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your time as well. Thanks for being here with us today. We'll next go to Chris Conway.
Thank you, committee, for allowing me to testify. My name is Chris Conway. I'm part of ASME Council 3, Local 3167. I've worked for the state for 9 years between DJS and the DOC. I work currently for DJS as a resident advisor at Greene Youth Center in Flintstone, Maryland. Throughout the pandemic, I, along with my co-workers as frontline workers for DJS, day in and day out, we went to work exposing ourselves and our families to this deadly disease. Our camp in particular has had multiple large outbreaks of COVID-19. One of the largest outbreaks of COVID, we had approximately 30 staff out. I just got over COVID for the second time, actually, after being exposed at work. Not only is this my second time contracting the disease at work, but this is now the second time I've brought COVID back to my family, especially my 5-year-old Ryan and my newborn Noah. In my 9 years with the state, we have not received decent raises that have been able to keep up with my family's expenses. Me and my coworkers were extremely happy with the raises our union just negotiated, and we want to keep on fighting to get what we deserve. If I did have more of a raise, I'd be able to provide for my family, as my wife is in school full-time for nursing, and my income is the only one we're living off of. Noah and Ryan deserve more. Thank you for the opportunity to let me speak, and please give us more to help better retain and recruit staff.
Thank you very much, Chris Conway, for being here. Definitely appreciate the opportunity and for everything that you said to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Davis. Is Mike Davis not on?
Mr. Davis is not able to join us today. I'm sorry.
Oh, yep, no problem. I believe that is the last individual for the Department of Juvenile Services. Did I miss anyone?
You were looking all set, Mr. Chair.
All right, seeing no other folks here for public testimony. Thank you all very much for your testimony, and thank you for being here today. Definitely appreciate your time and your advocacy as well. And to Secretary Abbott, thank you so very much for being here as well, and to your staff for being here to provide any answers that we have for you today. We'll also be sure to follow up by email with any questions that we have and ask that you just respond to those questions for us. And so with that, that will end the hearing for the Department of Juvenile Services. And that will end our hearing for the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee today. Again, my apologies for rushing through this. We have a packed day today, back-to-back meetings and hearings. And so with that, we will end today's hearing, and thank you all for your time.